The GB News pub is open, and yes, we've ordered a couple of beers. They were threepence cheaper than they were this morning, which can't be bad. And joining me for this episode of Talking Pints is Conservative Member of Parliament for Shipley, Philip Davies. Philip, welcome to the GB News pub. Very nice to see you. So you were there today in a packed House of Commons?
I wasn't actually in the House of Commons.
Weren't you?
I was watching it on the TV in my office. It's much more civilised, though.
Right. Are there enough seats in that place?
No, there aren't. No. I mean, there's, 400 seats, I think. There's 650 MPs, so...
Right, yeah.
So it's better watching it in the office.
What did you think of it?
Look, he's got a difficult task. He hasn't really got much room to play with. It's, the lockdown's, been terrible for lots of reasons, but, obviously for the nation's finances. I don't really think any self-respecting Conservative can be happy with a budget that's put up taxes so much, and but probably within the hand he was dealt, he probably did the best he probably could.
But this was the Labour Party budget, wasn't it? I mean, let's face it, on most issues now, your cabinet are more like Labour were a few years ago than they are Conservatives.
Well, they might be a bit more like Labour were a few years ago, but they're certainly not much like Labour are today.
What are Labour like today?
Well, I mean, but I think there's no doubt the centre of gravity of British politics has moved to the left over the last 20 years or so on most issues.
No, it really has. It really, really has. Now, you're a serial rebel. You vote against the government on virtually everything.
It's not quite true, but anyway.
Well, I might have a look at this. Quite a long list, So clearly not aiming for ministerial office, because that's not going to happen. And of course, you're married to Esther McVeigh, who, like you, fiercely independently minded and knows what she believes in.
Don't I know it?
Sure you do. What is the point? You've been in Parliament since 2005. What are you, Philip Davies, because you're not going to become a minister, that ain't going to happen, but as much chance as me getting honoured, What are you in politics for? Because you're in Parliament, you represent your constituency, and I get that bit, and that's an honour to do it. There's no question about that. But you're in a party that you're increasingly at odds with on some very, very major issues. What is Philip Davies trying, apart from having a jolly good time and upsetting everybody, what are you trying to do?
Well, look, you're absolutely right. I mean, I always say the one thing that me and Conservative Prime Ministers agree about is that I should never be promoted. And I don't want to be promoted. I said in my maiden speech...
It's not going to happen.
I said in my maiden speech I would never accept a promotion if I was ever offered one. But what I like doing in Parliament particularly, apart from representing the fantastic people of the Shipley constituency, is I like speaking up and saying things that I think lots of people in the country think, but hardly anybody in Parliament will ever say. And I think that actually one of the big problems with Parliament is that actually on most issues the majority opinion in the country is not the majority opinion in Parliament. In fact, often that opinion is never even heard in Parliament. And so I like speaking up for things, unfashionable causes you might call them, things that I think people in the country think, but politicians for whatever reason don't like saying. And I think sometimes that, if I feel I'm saying something and nobody else in there would have said that, then I feel that my position in Parliament is worthwhile. And so that's really what I like doing.
No, fair enough. And I mean, if you think about it, the whole European debate, and I got going on this, well, in '93, I sort of really committed I can't believe it, really, but I started standing in by-elections and doing all sorts of things and trying to raise the issue. And I did that because I felt like you, that just Parliament was out of touch on this issue. There was a lack of real knowledge in the country. And I'm just pondering, Philip, over this chat in the GB News pub. We could have had this conversation about Europe 20 years ago. We could have said there's basically not a single MP that wants to leave, and yet a lot of people a lot of people in this pub think we were better off out. And in the end, we got there, and what a hell of a victory it was. I mean, it wasn't easy, but we got there. But I'll tell you something. On global warming, firstly, there's actually more scepticism about the science, I think, than people realise. A lot of people say, well, hang on, what about volcanoes? What about sunspot activity? There's nobody saying, by the way, that 7.5 billion people on this planet's a good thing, in the sense that, it must be doing something. So the scepticism around the science. I wouldn't say it's huge scepticism, because certainly anybody under the age of 35 has been indoctrinated, without any sense of balance, and the same on the BBC and elsewhere. But where there's real scepticism is on wind energy. Mm-hmm. Where there's increasing anger is people realising over these last 10 or 15 years the amount of surcharge they've paid on their bills mm-hmm. to pay to people like David Cameron's father-in-law, who owns land in North Lincolnshire and has got wind turbines on them, to pay big offshore wind companies. So there's a real, I guess the higher bills go, the more they say, hang on, we've been ripped off for years on this. And now they're telling me that I've got to, in my Edwardian semi, install a heat pump, and it's probably going to cost 25 grand to get all the different building works done. And when the temperature drops below 5 degrees, it isn't going to work anyway. So I sense on this issue something's going on. Mm-hmm. And I know you spoke out about COP26 in the last couple of days. Just tell us what you said.
Well, look, my view is I'm not even arguing about the science, and there's people better qualified than me to talk about what's happening. And is the climate changing? Well, of course the climate's changing. The climate's always changed, and it always will do. So people say the climate deniers and all this stuff. Absolutely not. I'm perfectly happy to accept the climate is changing, and that those changes will cause some difficulties in different places around the world. I'm fully accepting of that. My point is that I even find saying it quite strange because it's so ludicrous that the political class have decided that the solution to this problem is that we're all going to get together around the world and we're collectively going to change the world's climate. Now, that to me is as ridiculous as it sounds saying it.
Oh, come on, Philip. You know that if Boris gets the right agreement in Glasgow over the next couple of weeks, temperature rises will be kept to exactly 1.5 degrees centigrade. I mean, it must be right, mustn't it?
Yeah.
I know, it's nonsense.
It's unbelievable. And so my point is that we're literally on the verge of committing to spend £1.4 trillion in this country that we don't have, by the way, whilst also at the same time piling on costs onto consumers who are struggling already with the cost of living. And we're going to do all that in order to get our carbon emissions down from where they are currently, which is less than 1% of global carbon emissions, to net zero. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, China, India, emerging economies in Africa, their increase in carbon emissions each year, their increase is going to be more than our total. And so we're going to be pursuing a policy that we can't afford, which is absolutely futile.
Yeah.
Because of the actions of the other countries around the world. And people say, well, of course, if we do this, other countries will follow suit.
No, other countries will take advantage of it.
Well,
because we're handing them heavy manufacturing, we're handing them heavy engineering, we're handing China massive strategic advantage. I mean, I'm completely with you on this. But when you call your leader, your party leader and Prime Minister, when you say that his environmental push is utterly futile, virtue signalling, does he ever speak to you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Does he?
Yeah.
What does he say?
Well,
It is before the watershed, so be careful.
Look, I get on very well with Boris. He's got lots of qualities. On this issue, he feels very strongly about it. I don't doubt his sincerity about the issue, but we just fundamentally disagree about the common sense of it. That's basically it. He thinks that this is really important. And to be honest, the majority of people in Parliament agree with that. I'm in a very, very small minority of MPs who think it's absolutely crazy to go down this route. The point I keep making is that, when people say, well, if we do this, other countries will follow suit. This is the same argument that CND used in the 1980s about unilateral nuclear disarmament. If we do it, everyone else will follow suit. It was absolute madness then, and this environmental version of it is madness now. And these countries are not following us; they're laughing at us, frankly. And China has been building a coal-fired power station every week. They've committed to build...
I think more than that, actually.
Well, they're committed to building 100 new airports over the next decade, and we're still in this view that if we just get ourselves to net zero and bankrupt ourselves in the process, we'll have sorted out the world's climate.
But how do we get change, Philip? Because we have a first-past-the-post system,
Yeah.
which means in England, which is 86% of the population, it's Labour or Conservative. There's the odd scattering of Liberal, and there's no way of changing that. It can't be broken. We don't have referendums very often on issues. I mean, would you be... the Daily Telegraph have been sort of floating this idea of what about a referendum on net zero? And I looked at it a couple of weeks ago and thought, I'm not sure. The poll overnight's remarkable. Quite remarkable.
It is, yeah.
Remarkable that a majority really want to have a proper open public debate about what we're doing in the name of climate change. Do you think there's an argument that we become a little bit more like Switzerland and we have the ability to have referendums on key issues? Now, that would devalue, in some ways, the role of Parliament, but how else getting things changed in this country is very hard, isn't it?
Yeah, yes, there's clearly an argument for it, and it works very well in Switzerland. Look, I'm a Conservative for many reasons, and one of those is that, I like our institutions and the way we do things. I don't want to go down the route of having a referendum on things like this. I think it should just be for really important constitutional issues. I don't think we should go down that route. But the reason why I think the poll is...
You say that, but if we do that, it ain't going to change.
Well, we'll see. I think that the reason why the polling is so keen on a referendum is it's one of the failings of Parliament, because Parliament is not reflecting the views of the public at large. And I've always believed that for a parliamentary democracy to work, everybody in the country's got to feel that at least somebody's speaking up for them. And too often, they don't see that. And so I think that, we've got to do better in Parliament at making sure that everybody feels represented. But I do think things can change on this as well. And look, you're the expert in this. You got the biggest change of all, largely due to your...
By getting millions to rebel.
Yes, and you played the biggest part of all in bringing about that change. There were some of us who were little foot soldiers that had played a little part, but you were...
You were there.
So you know this better than anybody. I trust in the great sense of the British public. I think they're always miles ahead of politicians on virtually every issue.
No, I agree.
And on this issue, I think there will be, it hasn't come yet, but there will be a massive backlash. When the real cost of this is discovered and people start to realise what's being expected of them, what freedoms they're having taken away from them, what additional costs are being forced on them, I think there will be a backlash of all backlashes. And to be perfectly honest, I suspect that many MPs and political parties, when that happens, will want to be part of that backlash.
We'll get the U-turn happening.
I do genuinely think
You may be right.
that.
I had a guest on earlier making the same point. What is it, Philip, with you and betting? You're one of the few MPs that speaks up in favour of gambling companies. You earn income from a global betting company. Surely betting's bad, isn't it?
Well, look, my mum was a bookmaker when I was growing up in Doncaster. She had her own betting shop. And, I'm certainly not going to trash my heritage and everything that my background. And, look, of course some people have a problem with gambling. And we should do everything we possibly can to stop that from happening. And when people do develop a problem, to help them get over that problem. Of course we should. But equally, people have a problem with alcohol. And alcoholism, any kind of addiction is bad. The question is, do we really want to ban everybody from doing something simply because a few people have a problem? And I don't believe in a free country that should be the right attitude. What we should do is identify those people who have an addiction and have a problem and give them all the support and help that we need, whilst allowing those people who pursue their activities without any problem at all to continue doing so. Look, I'm as critical of betting companies for lots of things that they do.
Do you bet?
Yeah, I do. I love having a bet.
So do I.
Particularly on the horse. And, one of the issues I have with betting firms is that they often restrict the stakes of people who make money. And I think, that's, they can't have it both ways. They can't say, look, we don't want to restrict the stakes of people who lose, but we do want to restrict the stake of people who win. So I can be as critical as the next person of betting companies. But I think overall, if you believe in freedom, then you've got to believe that people should have the freedom to pursue their activity whilst helping those who have a problem.
You are, without doubt, you are the least PC member of the current Parliament. And that's a good thing. I'm very happy that you are, and we need voices out there that are genuinely independent in their thought, and that's why I'd like to see electoral reform. I think we'd see more of those, but that's a story for another day. So what does Philip Davies now do? Because you've been in that parliament now for 16 years. You know, I did 21 years in Strasbourg, and that was way enough for me. But then everybody hated me there. Only half of Westminster hates you.
Might be more than that.
What next?
Well, I'm going to keep speaking up for my constituents on these issues, particularly where I think that the rest of the political class are not speaking about the issues that the people out in the country are. And that's what I've always tried to do in Parliament, and that's what I'll always continue to do. And I might be an unfashionable cause, I might be unpopular for doing it, but, you know, it's no point being in Parliament unless you're prepared to speak up for what you believe in. If you're not prepared to do that, what on earth's the point in being there?
That was Philip Davies on Talking Pints. Quite refreshing in a way.
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.